Hello, welcome to this episode of Kemper Made Easy. Today what we're going to look at is how to reamp using the Kemper in the digital environment, so using PDIF versus analog. I will look at analog in a separate tutorial. If you like what you see, please do subscribe. I will have future tutorials as well as original music in which I incorporate these techniques. For this tutorial, I'm using three primary pieces of equipment. One is the computer and DAW, but the other two for outboard gear is the Focusrite Claret 8 Pre, which is the Thunderbolt version, as well as the Kemper rack. To begin with, we need to look at the setup. You want to make sure that on your audio device, you have a PDIF out and input that can then be connected to the Kemper. And as you can see here, the output gets connected to the PDIF input on the Kemper, and then the input for the Focusrite comes from the output of the Kemper. So you want to make sure that digital communication is set up between the two devices. Then of course your audio device is then routed to your DAW, whether it's Thunderbolt or USB. So to look at the theory of what we're trying to accomplish when reamping is you're essentially recording a dry signal into your DAW and then being able to send that dry signal back to the Kemper, in which you can then manipulate the sounds. You can change profiles or add or subtract effects. So to begin with, your guitar would plug into your Kemper. The signal is then adjusted so it's split between a dry signal being one side and a processed on the other. And processed on the other is just the whatever profile it is that you want to start with. You want to hear a sort of normal, natural sound that you'd have within the song, maybe a distorted sound, because it would be very unnatural to have just a dry DI signal. These are then both recorded, so they're on separate channels because they are separated out. So you're gonna record a DI channel and you're gonna record your reference channel, which you can have for future reference, but doesn't really affect the overall preamping process. It's just something you want to go back to if it was one of your original references that you wanted to use. It's the original sound you wanted to use, and you may want to always compare it back to it. So that's why I always record it. Once the DI signal has been recorded, you're going to play that back from your DAW, in my case the Samplitude X4, and that dry signal will then go back into my audio device and then will be fed back into the Kemper. And the Kemper will then be adjusted so it's not a split signal anymore, but it's your normal signal. So a nice good stereo sound can be adjusted coming out of the Kemper, which then gets recorded back into Samplitude as your then reamped guitar sound. So without any further ado, let's go into the environment and take a look how to do all this. Okay, here we are in the Samplitude X4 environment. Many other DAWs work in very similar type ways. I have a couple of tracks already set up. One is for this voiceover, and one for drum, and one for bass, just to give me a little bit of a background audio, so when I demonstrate the guitar with it, you have a reference point. The first thing I'm going to do is set up a couple of tracks, and as we saw earlier, the two tracks, so one is going to receive the dry DI signal guitar from the Kemper, and the second one is going to be to receive the processed signal. And the processed signal is just for a more natural feel while you're recording it, because it wouldn't be normal and natural to recording just a dry straight guitar. So to do that, I'm going to insert two tracks, 1 and 2. I'm going to call the first one Kemper DI, and the second one I'm going to call Kemper Processed. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to then set the PDIF left and right to go to each of these channels, because the left one, as we saw earlier, is going to be the dry signal, and the right, as we saw earlier, is going to be the processed. Now within Samplitude, I go into track options and I have a drop down menu here, and you can see right now they're in stereo, they're combined, but if I click onto my mono, I can split those out, and the PDIF one is going to go to the dry line, and the processed is going to go to the right side. Once again, it was in stereo, so now into mono, and PDIF 2 is going to be my right side from my DAW. Now that's all set up to go, and we now need to set up the Kemper. So flipping over to the Kemper unit, what we want to do here is you want to set out the DI line and that processed line and send those to Samplitude. The first thing you're going to do is press the output button. Once pressed, you'll see a series of options in the display, and you want to go to the PDIF output. Currently, if you've been playing with your Kemper in a normal way, it's likely set onto master stereo. By spinning the dial, a number of different options pop up. What I would set it on is onto the git on one side, and then the backslash, then master mono. And what that'll do is it'll send the dry line to one side, which is the git, and it'll send the mono line, which would be your processed line, to the right hand side within Samplitude. Now back in the Samplitude environment, I want to double check to make sure that those signals are coming from the Kemper, the dry and the processed. So as you recall, we have the Kemper DI channel that we rigged up within PDIF 1. And if I press the speaker button within Samplitude, that gives me the monitoring. So we should get a nice clean DI sound, which you can hear there. Now similarly, the process sound should also come through. So this is with my selected profile at the moment, which is a high watt profile. And we can hear that's coming through. So to record with my backing track, it would sound a bit funny if I just use a DI line. And I don't want that to come through while I'm recording either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust that track for the output. Instead of it going monitoring out into my headphones, I'm going to select track 15 and 16, which in my setup here is actually the PDIF output, which we will use later when we need to reamp. So I'll set it to that setting now. It's not going to affect anything in the Focusrite or in the DAW environment. So now you're not going to hear the DA. You'll hear my guitar, but that's just coming through the microphone, bleeding through the mic. So all I'm left with now is the process sound. Now I need to arm both the tracks. I'm going to arm the processed one just for the heck of it. You don't have to record the process because you will be reamping and checking, but you might want to keep it just as a reference point if that's the initial sound that you thought you might like. So let's just record this small short phrase and then we'll look at some of the reamping. With a nice ninth finish. So now we have our two recorded tracks, the DI being above and much cleaner looking waveform than that of the distorted one below it. And if we take a listen back, you will hear that it has just that very clean guitar sound. And that's the signal we'll be feeding back into the Kemper so we can manipulate it. And similarly, if you want to just listen to the process, you're thinking, was this good enough or do we want something different? You can listen back to that as well. So what we want to do next though is we want to send the DI signal back to the Kemper and then have that process and be able to play with the Kemper, play with sounds, add effects, subtract effects, and see what works and what best fits into the mix. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to mute this processed signal just so it doesn't get in the way, but I can always go back to it if that was my original thinking. And I'm going to add a new track. And this one I'm going to call Kemper Reamp. And this time, as mentioned previously, the signal that can come back can be a stereo signal from the Kemper. So when I set up this track, I'm going to make sure it's in stereo, and then the PDIF 1 and 2 then will be fed back from the Kemper. And from the send signal, once again within the Kemper DI, I am going to, on the playback, I'm setting it to channels 15 and 16, which in my Focusrite is actually the PDIF 1 and 2 return. So that's actually sending the signal back to the Kemper through PDIF. I don't know why Focusrite doesn't label that better, but that's the way it is. So in your DAW, make sure it's the PDIF output that you're selecting. Now what's going to occur is this signal, when I play it back, is going to feed into the Kemper, and the Kemper's process signal will then come back into the DAW. So let's flip over to the Kemper so we see the setup on it, on how to adjust to receive the signal and send it back to a Samplitude. Now within the Kemper, we want to set it up so that it receives the DI signal from Samplitude and sends back a processed reamp version back into Samplitude again so that you can record it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your PDIF output is set back to master in stereo, because the signal that comes back will be recorded in stereo. It doesn't have to be in mono anymore. So once again, press the output button and then adjust it so that that master stereo option comes back up. But what we want to do now is we want the Kemper to receive that DI PDIF input from Samplitude. So to do this, we're going to press input. And when you press input, once again, you get a number of different options. But what we want to look at is we want to look at the front input and the input source. And if you spin on that dial, an option will come up looking that says PDIF input reamp. Adjust it to that setting and you'll be all set to go for the signal to be sent back into Samplitude. Now we're all set up. We have the DI signal being sent from Samplitude to Kemper, and the Kemper back now to Samplitude into this new track called Kemper Reamp. I want to make sure that I'm monitoring it, so I need to turn the monitor on so I can actually hear what's coming back from the Kemper to make my adjustments. What I also do is I set up a loop so that I'm not stopping, rewinding, and then it comes to the end, I got to rewind again. So just set up a loop so it just keeps going round and round and you can hear what's coming. I'm going to start this loop, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over my the rig manager, the software, so we can see how we can manipulate and change profiles and see what works to our taste for the reamping side of it. So just pressing play. There we go. We hear that going nicely, a bit loud, so I think I'll turn it down to begin with. Now I'm going to bring over the profiler, and I'm going to try this amp. Not bad. So you can see I've changed the amps over slightly. I'll try the basement. Now it might be that I like the sound of this one, but maybe it'll sound better if I add a little bit of delay to it. That's the delay widening effect that Kemper has. Put a bit of a delay signal on it. Maybe just to fill out a bit more, maybe a bit of vintage chorus. And now I'm at a place I like, or I like that sound. So now what I want to do is I want to record that for the future. So you simply just press record on the Kemper Reamp, take off the loop, then go to the beginning and just simply press record, and our song kicks in. I've kind of recorded the level a little bit low, but in real life I'd probably turn that up a little bit so I can adjust it. Right, now I'm going to mute that so I don't hear the DI. I've muted my previous processed line. Take that off monitoring, take it off record, and then I can just play that back. And this is now my recorded version that I have within the song. And that is how you DI in Samplitude using Kemper, so you can reamp it back into Samplitude again, so you can make fine adjustments to the sounds of your guitar within your tracks. Hope that was helpful. If you liked it, please subscribe. There'll be more tutorials coming in the near future, as well as original songs. If you take a listen to my song called Hold On my channel, all the guitars are using Kempers, and I've reamped through the whole thing with the rhythm section as well as the lead. So thank you for listening, and happy recording and playing with your equipment. Bye.